Hello and welcome back to the Center for International Reproductive Health Training series on writing scientific journal articles. This is the second module on the methods section of a scientific journal article. I'm Ella August, Clinical Assistant Professor in the University of Michigan School of Public Health. In this module, we'll start with the role of the methods section in a scientific paper. I'll open with some thoughts about what the methods section should do, its function in a scientific paper. We'll then move on to what specific elements go into a methods section, highlighting examples from different types of studies. And for this module, I've organized the methods section loosely into two parts. The first part orients your reader to the study, and the second part is all about carrying out the data collection and analysis. After I outline the elements that go into a methods section, we'll touch on making sure your methods are connected to your research question. Then I'll mention some formal guidelines on writing certain parts of the methods section. Again, I want to mention that I'll be going through examples fairly quickly and that I've included references on the bottom of each slide so you can circle back to take a closer look at the papers I highlight in this video. In your methods section, you need to explain how your study was done and justify why you used the methods you did. The methods provide a context to understand and interpret results, and of course, the method should provide enough detail so other researchers can replicate the study. Replication is important because a finding becomes more convincing if many studies find the same result. Now let's take a look at the type of information you tend to see in the first part of the methods. Big picture information about the study helps your reader understand the basics before moving into the details. Typically, the first paragraphs describe where the study took place, the study design, the population and sample, recruitment, where the data come from if it was from an outside source, and ethical considerations and approvals. Let's look at some examples. For the next few examples, I'm going to show different types of studies to highlight how different each method section can be. This study is on an assessment tool for midwifery education in Bangladesh. So for this study, the research question is completely tied to the setting and location. Therefore, the methods section is going to emphasize the setting. You can see the authors spend an entire paragraph describing the study setting. And another section is dedicated to the study participants, which really does still reflect the setting. The study design is also mentioned right at the beginning of the methods, which is typical for most studies. So again, let me pause for a moment to mention that there's a lot of text on the screen in this and other examples, and the purpose of showing you these big blocks of text is really to help you see how these methods examples are organized. And obviously, it's too much to read now. The references are on the bottom, so you can look them up afterward if you like. So going back to our example, in the data collection section, there's information on recruitment, which again, if you read it, you can see the connection to the setting in Bangladesh, and then the study's ethical considerations are presented. Now, let's take a look at a different kind of study. This study investigates covert contraception use in Uganda. The data come from two large studies that collected data from the Rakai district of Uganda. The quantitative survey they describe is part of this community cohort survey, and you can see here they give a brief description of the survey, and then the authors refer the readers to references with more details on the study, and this is typical for a smaller analysis that draws on data from a large survey or cohort study. So providing citations for the large cohort study serves to provide credibility for the present analysis since it uses an established source of data, and on a very practical note, citing this study also frees up space for other information. In the part that starts for our analysis, the authors carefully explain which data from the big study they used for their analysis, and the ethical considerations are described at the end of the paragraph. Now let's take a look at another different kind of study. This study tests body warming approaches to evaluate their effect on maternal hypothermia. It's a clinical study, quite different from the settings of the previous studies, but still the basic organization of the methods is the same as the previous examples. After describing the ethical considerations, the first part describes the study design, which is experimental, and then the authors describe the sample. This paper situates the setting and study sample differently than the previous examples. In the previous papers, the setting and study population are completely intertwined with the research question. In this example, the researchers aren't taking time to describe the geographic location and characteristics of their participants or how they were recruited because they're not important in this study. Okay, let's move on now to discuss what I think of as the second part of the methods, where the authors describe their data collection and analysis. In this part, the measures, the instruments and questionnaires used to collect and record data are described and, where possible, justified as valid and precise. Ideally, they're shown to have these qualities in the population being investigated in the study. The protocol and approach for collecting data are also described here, including the timing, a description of the training that data collectors receive, information on blinding the data collection team if this took place, along with other information like protocol for storing samples, for example. Lab analysis is also described in this part, including sample storage and lab protocols with details about the lab tests performed. And finally, statistical analysis is usually included at the very end, and this section should describe the analysis used to address each research question, and the connection to the research questions should be clear. Now I want to circle back to the patient warming study we looked at earlier. So again, there's a lot of text on this page and there's no need to read it all right now, but the thing to notice here as you scan down these passages is all the detail about the protocols the researchers followed, including the exact timing and temperature they used for their lab procedures, the name of the laboratories, and the manufacturer information. In addition to detail, the researchers also provide support and references to justify their approaches. And all this detail and justification serves two purposes. First, it provides enough information to allow other researchers to replicate the study. It also helps the researchers build the case that the work they did was of high quality, making the case that their research team is credible. In turn, this allows readers to place more faith in the results that come next. This is a nice example from the American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. In the methods section, the researchers do a great job of explaining why they did what they did. And so often this type of explanation and rationale is missing. So without going into the details about this particular passage, I'll just mention that first, the authors explain the premise of their decision about what they did, in this case, including data on SGA separately from maternal features of preeclampsia. Then, building on this rationale, they explain how they organize the data. Again, the details of this particular example aren't so important, but the main point is that anytime I see the word because in the methods, in my view, that's a good sign. The more you explain and justify in your paper, the more successful you will be. This paper on missed opportunities for HPV immunization in young women has a nice statistical analysis section. The thing I like about it is that after identifying that logistic regression models were estimated, the authors explain what the models were used for. In other words, they connected their method to their study question. This really helps the reader understand what was done and for what purpose. When you're planning how to organize your methods section, take a look at the author guidelines from your target journal to see if there's any guidance there, and look at example articles similar to your own topic from your target journal. You can find additional guidance here and here. In sum, you can think of your method section as having two parts. The first part orients your reader to the study, and the second part is all about carrying out the data collection and analysis. Your method should explain what you did. It should also include why you did what you did. The type of information included should match the type of study. I suggest you follow examples of papers published on topics and study designs similar to yours. And finally, the analytic description should be included for each of your research aims and questions. That's it for this module. Thank you.